Now let's use something called dynamesh to add a little bit more detail to our character. So I want to preface this whole thing by just kind of saying, in ZBrush there are a lot of different ways to get where you want to go. And so the method that we use in this course is going to be maybe different than what you're going to find out that you want to use, or even in some of the other courses at Digital Tutors, some of the ways that we go through things. And part of the reason for that is that I want to make sure to show you some of these features that we might not otherwise have a chance to look at. Something like dynamesh, which we're going to look at right now. You don't necessarily have to use it in this way. You're going to find the best method, but we want to get through one complete project, and we're going to do a particular sort of order of things in doing that. But just keep in mind that that isn't the only way to do it. Okay, it may not even be the best way depending on your project, but for us, it's going to give us a chance to look at some of the features in ZBrush that we might not otherwise have a chance to see. Okay, so if we take a look at this this armature, this is 03 begin, and so you can see that I've just kind of modified the proportions of it a little bit, giving them some larger hands and arms, and tweak the head a little bit. Again, yours doesn't have to look like this. It can be completely custom. The idea is that you just want your Z-sphere armature here and ready to go. So to see the geometry that we can create from our Z-sphere armature, you can hit the A key to get a preview of that, and you can see this is actually an adaptive skin. And so ZBrush is creating geometry to flow around your Z-sphere armature, whatever it happens to be. And you can see the adaptive skin settings by going into the tool palette, coming all the way down to the bottom to adaptive skin, opening that up, and you can see right now we have preview on and our density is set to 2. If I hit the A key, you have some settings here that you can change, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So if we hit A, you can see the density set to 2. If we increase this, it goes to 3. You can think of these as sort of subdivision levels, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. But if you increase the density, it's going to make that a higher res model. So for us using dynamesh, it's okay to have that a little bit higher. And to actually create the geometry, we're going to say make adaptive skin. Now, nothing has happened here in our canvas. We still have our basic tool. And this is something that I do want to touch on up here in the tool palette. You can see if I open this up, it has saved out this skin, and then we still have our original Z tool. So you can switch out Z tools at any time. If you're in edit mode, and you can come in here and you can choose any of these tools, or you can choose your skin, but you can always go back to that Z tool. Now, in order to save out your model, you do want to save out your Z tools. That's how we're going to save those, the models that we're working with. You can save the Z tools. You can also save them as Z projects, which will save everything, but usually we'll save Z tools. But within the context of your session in ZBrush, you're always, whatever you have loaded into this palette, you'll always be able to just quickly switch back and forth between those. And even if you switch away from it, you're not going to lose that detail that you have there. Okay, but if you want to come back to it later, you definitely want to save that out. So let's choose the skin, which I think we have selected here. Yep. And if we go to geometry, you can see that those levels are actually on there. Okay, looking at the density from the adaptive skin. And so if you remember that, this density right here, that corresponds to those subdivision levels, which in this case, right now we don't need, okay? And so I'm gonna go ahead and delete those. Now, dynamesh, so right now we have a sort of finite shape and number of polygons, right? So if you take a look at this, you can see the polygons there. So we're not gonna you won't be able to add more polygons just by moving things around. If you start to add too much detail, it's gonna stretch out. But dynamesh allows us to get around that by recalculating the number of polygons as we work. So to do this, I'm going to turn off, we're going to come down to geometry, turn off project. I'm going to change this resolution to 1024, and then let's turn on dynamesh for this mesh. So now what we can do is I can grab the move, and so these are our 3D brushes. We can click those, or we can hit the B key, and then you can select brushes here. You can also narrow it down by clicking on the first letter of the name. So for instance, if I want move, I can hit the M key, and that'll narrow things down, and then I can come in here and choose maybe the move. Let's make sure that symmetry is on, and the X, get a larger draw size, and we can start to move this geometry to shape it. Okay, and you can see the polygons are moving. We're not adding any extra polygons. We're just kind of using this tool to shape it. We can hit Shift to smooth out the polygons. You can see that gets rid of those facets there. If we wanted to come in here and add like a brow ridge, we could kind of start to define it like that. Kind of smooth it out a little bit more, but maybe we'll kind of pull it out this way and smooth it out. So, something like that. Now at this point, it's fine. We don't have to have any more polygons to get the shape that we want. But what if we want to pull out, like, for instance, we want to pull out some sort of tentacles. So to do that, I'm going to choose the snake hook brush, and I'll make sure I get a fairly large draw size. And then I want to come in and just start to drag off and down. Okay. Now you can see that it actually looks pretty good, but we do get some stretching on those polygons. So what we're going to do is hit Control Drag, and that'll recalculate those. So then we can kind of smooth it out. And that allows us to add these really big shapes and be able to recalculate those. So you can see there, all stretched out, and then we're able to recalculate it, smooth it out, and that allows us to add those shapes in there. Okay, now we can also subtract with this. So for instance, I'll go back to Move, and let's kind of move this head up a little bit. And let's say we want to kind of pull out or subtract some of the eye, an eye cavity there. So there's actually some brushes in here, some insert brushes that we can use. And so what I want to do is I want to insert a sphere. And when working with Dynamesh, we can use these to subtract or add to our mesh and make it seamless. Now we've still got symmetry on. Now when I draw this out, I want to make a hole. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to drop these spheres in. And you can see they sort of show up as these hollow spheres. Now, Control dragging will get rid of the mask, and then Control dragging again will subtract out that hole. Now I can come in here and smooth it out. I can go back to Move and come in here and start to, manipulate where that hole is. And anytime I want to, I can Control drag and it'll remesh and create sort of an optimal geometry for that, or optimal shape. Okay, so you can start to get a little bit more detail. You can pull off, big pieces, and Dynamesh will allow you to sort of remesh those so that they're not, all stretched out. Again, remesh. We're still in Dynamesh. Now, usually we're not going to do, too much in the way of detail sculpting when we're working with Dynamesh, but we just want to get kind of the main overall features built in. Okay, so once you do that, you can kind of, add little pieces in certain areas or subtract. The next thing we want to do is create our kind of base mesh from this, and then we'll do a kind of a proper subdivision level type sculpt. Okay, so let's talk about using Z Remesher to create our base mesh in the next lesson.